accreditation. Falk had accreditation. It was one of the few things he was certain of. Most of everything else was a fuzz. It was hard to peg time of day. His body wasn't telling him. He reflected that he hadn't had a steady diurnal rhythm in about 5 years, and the stay on firewall with its frantic 20-minute days had utterly fucked his bioclock. It looked like it was late afternoon. The sky over Shaverton's glass masts, blocks, and pylons looked like a late afternoon sky. It was the color of lemon Turkish delight, with an icing sugar dust of clouds. He didn't know how long the day-night cycle was on 86. It wasn't that he'd rushed his pre-search, he just wasn't much interested in the physical ecosystem. He'd learned that by living in it. During acclimatation and the trip in system on the gradually decelerating spinrad driver, he'd studied the political, military, and social content of the briefing packet and any other documents he could access. The SO was doing a more than usually extravagant job of redacting material and neutering news outlets, even the big networks and authorized broadcasters. His meeting with Major Fancyman had been designed to deliver a specific message. The message was, Lex Falk, you are an acclaimed correspondent with several agency awards to your name, and a reputation for hard facts and penetrating coverage. Therefore, the SO is very pleased to welcome you to Settlement 86, and to validate your accreditation. Having you here proves to the public back home that, despite reports of open conflict, the Settlement Office has nothing to conceal on 86, and your reportage will be received as unvarnished and credible. You will, of course, report only what we permit you to report. That had been pretty much it. Fancyman had told him all of that without expressly using any of those actual words. Falk needed to understand it, and needed to make it clear he understood it. If necessary, the message could be reinforced through further meetings with SO execs more senior than Fancyman. If really necessary, an accommodation might be reached where the SO surrendered some juicy nugget to Falk, something that would lend any correspondence he filed the bat squeak of raw truth. One hand washes the other. Falk sat back in the body mold seat as the driver turned west onto Equestrian and accelerated towards the hazy megastructure of the terminal. It amused him to think that the Settlement Office had precisely fuck-all idea how uninterested he was in any of it. He was bone-light and lagged from too many years riding drivers. He was having trouble finding anything he actually engaged with anymore, and he'd only agreed to the 86 commission because the fee with expenses was generous by any network standards, and the whole thing smelled just like another Pulitzer. He had issues. He had a few things he should have taken care of long since, things he couldn't really work up the enthusiasm to tackle head-on. He had a vague plan, which he'd share with anybody who asked because it made him sound layered, of going home, rebuilding his health and leasing someplace on the ocean for a year while he switched gears and wrote that novel. The addendum he didn't share was that he was no longer sure what that novel was about, or that the prospect really didn't get him all that fucking thrilled, though living beside the ocean sounded nice. Falk hadn't warmed to 86 much. The climate of the Shaverton region, at whatever time of whatever year it was, nudged at the comfort limits of hot and humid. It was one of those places, and Falk had been to a few, that wasn't a natural fit for occupation. It was a tiny margin of variation, almost a nuance thing. But just because the atmosphere wasn't technically inimical to human life, it didn't naturally follow that people ought to live there. Outdoors it was too hot in an odd way, and too bright. There was an odd saturation to colors. Indoors everything was too cold. Everything smelled of air con and a ubiquitous lemon-scented twang of insect aside. The driver took him to the GEO. It was the name of both the Corp and the serious glass mast the Corp occupied in the landskirts of the massive terminal. From the executive offices, employees of Geoplanitia Enabling Operator could see the heavy-hipped ferries banging up and down out of the arrestor silos on the Cape, serving the vast drivers lurking invisibly upstairs at the edge of space. There was a bar in the basement, flushed with sickly lighting, piped music, and a funk of bug spray, and fitted out with early settlement-era furniture, undoubtedly repro, woven from wicker-effect polymer lattice. The place made up in business what it lacked in soul. There were distinct currents separating the crowd, non-local correspondents and affiliates, sorted by old acquaintance or network loyalty, GEO employees, locals working the room, shilling everything from sources to sex in order to leverage a little network expense account action. Falk got talking to a GEO exec at the rail of the Marble Effect bar. The exec was ordering a tray of drinks.